Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. On today's show, we have Tom Ciurczak. That's right, Tom Ciurczak with his new album, Call Me Ishmael, in stores now, or not in stores, but online and on Apple Podcasts. And not podcasts, Apple, whatever the music thing's called now. It used to be called iTunes, Google, all Spotify, all thing. I think it's a great album. He's a great Nail member from BLC of America. So Tom Ciurczak in a second. But before we talk any further, we got to tell you about the original Energy Focus with their N Focus color tuning lighting system, Greg. Bypass LED tubes.
On today's show, you're going to hear a little more about Tom, and he talked about his background in the specialty lighting market, in addition to music, but specialty lighting. And what that means is he kind of focused on one thing, and he kept a real tight, narrow profile and said, I want to be in the specialty market. Similar to what Energy Focus is doing. They're not saying we're everything to everyone, but they do have an awesome product, and when they get it, they deep dive it and they figure it out and make it the best it can be. And for a retrofit solution, if you want human-centric lighting, N Focus is the ticket. You can reuse your existing fixture and just put a new tube in that's dimmable and color changing, easy to control with their control system or controller that you mount on the wall, and a lot cheaper than buying a brand new fixture and all that fancy stuff you got to do.
So the original, energyfocus.com, ENERGYFOCUS.com, baby. And of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, of which Energy Focus and Tom from BLC are both vendor and members of that association. For right now, we got Tommy Ciurczak coming in hot. Welcome to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast, Tom Ciurczak.
Wow. Thank you.
Say hello to Greg Ehrich.
Hey, Greg. How you doing?
Good, Tom. Thanks for coming on. And for those who just listened to it, Mike held up a Straight Outta Quarantine T-shirt that looked like Straight Outta Compton T-shirt.
Yeah, Straight Outta Quarantine. So, Tom, before we get into it, I want Scotty just to cue up one of the songs from your new album.
Oh, cool.
So, Greg, right now you're in the Shangri-La Hotel in Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that beautiful lounge singer?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, she's about to do a duet with Tom Ciurczak.
Oh, she is, huh?
Yeah. There's Tommy.
This is Tom going?
It's Tom. It's my favorite song from the album, Tom.
Okay, cool.
Just wait. You got to wait for the duet. So good. Sounds just like that girl in Hong Kong. What? I've listened to this song hundreds of times.
And you duet with him too?
This is beautiful music, Tom. Now listen to this. Listen to this. Turn it up a bit, Scott.
I feel so burned out.
Woo!
I can't get my mind off of you.
You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
All right, kill it. So, Tom, before we get into light bulbs and everything else, who is that?
That was my daughter.
Get out of here!
Oh, she has a professional a cappella group in LA, and she actually hooked me up with everybody to get this thing started. I mean, she knew the engineer knew the drummer and the bass player and the keyboard player, and then he put everything together. So she started it all. So I needed her to do some song on this album, and we rearranged the whole thing to make it a duet. It wasn't a duet when I wrote it, but when I wrote it, it was without the jazz trumpet, without that whole jazzy feel. But we changed everything around at the recording studio. We put the trumpet in. We made it a duet, back and forth duet. So it's really, in fact, I was posting it on Facebook the other day. Here's the acoustic version that I turned in as the demo, and here's what we wound up making the song as. And it's quite a contrast between, what it started at and what it finished at.
What was the name of that song? Or is the name of that song, sorry?
Strung Out.
Strung Out. Yeah. It's such a good, you know what? That's a good song, period. That's not, that's my favorite song from your album. That's a good song. Like that's a solid, I don't even know what type of music, lounge music, that whatever you want to call it. That's a solid piece of music. And I want to compliment you on that. There's a couple more on the album too. What inspired you to write this thing?
Well, so yeah, I've been writing music since I've been 12. I mean, this is my hobby that I've been doing for a very long time. And I used to play in all kinds of rock bands and stuff when I was growing up. And I wrote songs all the way through in college. And even when I got out, I was playing in a lot of local clubs in California once I moved out there. And I went to some songwriting camps. I think it was 2014. I went to a Steve Earle songwriting camp in upstate New York called Camp Copperhead. And I must have met 100 different singer-songwriters. I mean, I really found my lost tribe when I went there. Everybody was a singer-songwriter. Everybody was a guitarist. And they all started putting out albums. And I was like, geez, I'm going to have to keep up with the Joneses. So if everybody here can put out an album, I can do it too. So I started on the whole process about 3 years ago at Thanksgiving. We were just sitting around the Thanksgiving table talking. And my daughter came up with the idea. She goes, well, why not just put you in contact with the engineer that does all of the Lola's work and see, if he can help put this thing together. And really, that's how it all started. And I met with this guy, Brett Grossman, about 2 years ago at a restaurant. And we just sketched everything out proverbially on a napkin. We said, okay, here's what we want to do. We put it all down on a napkin. And the whole thing came together. It was, listen, the journey is much more fun than the finished product. The whole concept of going into the studio, bringing all the musicians in, teaching them all the music, recording all the songs, that was really a blast. I mean, the finished product is great, but the process of doing everything was so much fun. I'm ready to do a second one. I liked it so much.
How many songs have you written in your life?
Hundreds.
This is your first album?
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever decided to take it to that level. I mean, I've always would play them out live, but I never thought about putting it down on an album until I went to that camp and I met all these people and they were doing it. And I thought, gee, if they can do this, why can't I do this? And, I'm not going to get any younger, so I guess I'm a late bloomer on all of this, but why not? So I did it. And it's just getting out there. I released it July 24th. And so it's starting. It's on the charts. It's been hovering on the AMA charts somewhere between 220 and 180 or something to that effect. So it's on the charts. And there was a jam band chart that came out yesterday. Relix jam band came out at debuted at 26, which was kind of cool. And I just got that yesterday. And there's, Dylan's on it, and Elvis Costello, and Steve Earle, and just all kinds of people that you would know. And so I was pretty honored that I got up to like 26 on this jam band chart. So I thought that it played by probably about 60, 70 radio stations across North America. I used I have a marketing company working with me, and we've been promoting it to a lot of radio stations. So it is getting a lot of small college station and small AAA station type of airplay, but it's getting airplay.
And of these, you said a couple hundred songs or hundreds that you've written. Were all of them on this album recently written since that 2014 camp, or did you pull back from old stuff you wrote when you were a teenager or 20s, 30s, 40s, anything like that?
There's a combination. Good question. There's about 4 that are within the last year that I wrote. That particular song I wrote just before the album. I think I wrote that one. Roll the Dice, Top of the World, and I think there's one other in there that I wrote real recently. But some of them go back to the 70s. There's a couple of songs in there, 1970, 78, 79, that time frame. So, you know, I there's one we did a video on called not Do You Know My Name, but we did it live in the studio, and Faces in the Crowd, that's the one. And we did that live in the studio. I think I wrote that back in 78. And that was really a challenge because I had to teach all the musicians the song, and we had to record it and we had to video it probably all by the third take. So I was pretty nervous on that one. I wasn't quite, it's 10 in the morning and I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. So I'm over there drinking a beer at 10:30 and they're looking at me. I remember the girl, there's a violin player. She goes, oh, you're a real rock star, aren't you? I'm like, stop it. Because they're all eating and drinking coffee, and I'm slamming a beer just to make sure that I'm going to be no nerves and I'm going to get it out smoothly, which, you know, by the third take, it came out.
And what do you classify yourself as, a type of music?
I think it's more rock. I mean, it is more classic rock than anything else. That's why I was surprised, you know, Michael, when you like the one song, because that one song is really an anomaly. It's more of a jazz song or kind of a jazzy song where everything else is a little bit more rockish. You know, the first three, four songs come out and they're very Springsteen sounding type of rock songs, where that one really is a jazz song. And I think there's a couple that also go in different directions. There's an Americana type of song, and there's maybe an Eagle-esque type of song, but most of them are pretty straight rock type of things.
Yeah, you know, I kind of felt it was like I got the Bruce Springsteen thing a little bit, but I was feeling a little bit more Bon Jovi actually than Bruce Springsteen. Yeah, I mean, just my own opinion. There's one song in there that's very Bon Jovi-esque. But let me ask you, when you say, I don't remember which song it is, but when you say "Pass me the hooch," what are you drinking?
So that's a song. Let me tell you, first of all, that's moonshine. But first of all, that's a song that comes out of a rock opera I wrote. So I wrote this rock opera. I started writing it in high school, and then I put it on the shelf, and then I finished writing it around 12. There's about 35 songs in this called the Celluloids. And I needed a song for the CD, and I thought it stood on its own 2 feet very, very well. But the lead character in that song is modeled after a guy called Kid Shalene. Do you remember who Kid Shalene is?
No, man.
Probably not.
Nope.
There's a movie called Cat Ballou, and Cat Ballou had this drunken cowboy played by Lee Marvin, and Lee Marvin won an Academy Award Best Actor for this guy called Kid Shalene. They hired this guy, and he turned out to be an absolute drunk, but he could only perform when he was drunk. And so
sounds like great.
Basically basically. But the other story I just told you about doing Faces in the Crowd. But anyway, so the song is modeled after this guy Kid Shalene, who is the hero of the song, and you know he's trying to dry out, and they keep pulling him back into, you know, solve whatever the problem is. Crazy Jesus Christ from outer space type of theme, but I thought it worked real well by itself. But yeah, that when I say pass me the hooch, it was, we're talking about moonshine, and we're talking about a guy that can't perform unless he's drunk.
Now, you are a hardcore lighting guy, but before I get into that, I just a little bit more on the songwriting. Do all of your songs kind of come together in the same manner in which you what's your process like? How does it go?
You know, that's a great question, because one of the things that I write most of the time I write in a linear type of, where I start with a melody verse, and I work from the verse through to the chorus to the bridge, and that type of concept. And but what happens when you do it that way is sometimes your choruses aren't very strong. So some of the last songs that I wrote for the album, Roll the Dice and Toppled, I actually worked from the inside out, where I wrote the choruses and then I went backwards and wrote the verses after I put the choruses in. Because that way I thought I could get a much stronger chorus to the songs, and I actually think it worked. But the idea when you're a songwriter is you want to change it up and you want to try to do it different every time. You don't want to do it the same way every time. You try not to plagiarize yourself. You try to keep trying to come up with something original and something different. And you're looking for that spark. You're looking for that, lightning bolt to hit. And sometimes it does, and a lot of times it doesn't. But I think the most important thing if you're a songwriter is you got to write a lot of songs, because you're going to throw away most of them. Most of them are going to be terrible. But occasionally you're going to get some really good stuff. And that's what you're looking for. Is like for every, 10 or 20 that you write, most of them might be just absolute garbage. But you're going to get better at it the more you work at it. Just like anything you do, the more you work at it and the more that you kind of reflect on what's good and what's bad, bingo. Go ahead. You're looking at me like you got thumbs up. You need something.
That's just our little communication.
I have a big question
we
for
use
you.
for, why don't you go, Mike?
You
Lay
go.
out your big one if it's music related. Mine's going to get into lighting. Go.
Okay, let me just finish one off here. So I interview a lot of musicians on my live show. I don't know how many it's been, but like at least a dozen. Okay, and we often talk about how there's not a lot of good albums coming out now, and the idea of an album art. The album art on your album, by the way, is very interesting. My kids like your album. My wife likes your album, and my daughter. We downloaded a couple of the songs to her player, so that's a compliment, bud.
Thank you.
But, yeah. But you know what? You know what's interesting is that you see, often artists say this: I'm trying to do something different. I'm trying to do something unique. I'm trying to do something this and that. I actually think, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I think the most successful way to make music is to take your most popular song and try to duplicate it over and over and over again. And I'm going to give you an example. Two of the most popular songs of all time, I think, are Wild Thing and Funky Cold Medina. And those songs almost sound identical to one another. Like if you put one on, you might think it's the other. And if you put the other on, you might, you know what I'm saying? It's like almost like that's Tone Loc's most famous rap songs. And you can't really tell the difference between the two. It's kind of like the same thing. And there's certain melodies that work and there's a certain sound that works for you. And I think it's a mistake for artists to try to change it up. I mean, the great ones, fine, the Beatles, Prince, but very few people are in those kind of categories where it's like I'm gonna change something up big time. I mean,
I agree with
Guns
you.
N' Roses tried to change it up and they just stick to rock, man. So there's what do you think about that? I always hear artists say that. I think it's wrong. I think if you're a struggling artist and you're trying to get out and there's a couple good songs that have hit with people, why not go down that path?
No, I do think that there's limitations into people's style. So you want to stay up, you're going to sound like you no matter what. Right. But I think what I was talking about is you're constant, as an artist, you're constantly looking to, and it's how do you stay within your boundaries and still be creative? I mean, I have a limited vocal, so I can't go too far outside of my vocal range work. But you want to be creative within your boundaries and come up with something that's original and unique and yet that's interesting for people to listen to. And that's, I think, is part of the challenge when you're writing things, right? Is how do you do that? And it's just a form of escapism. Is when you write songs, you're alone by yourself and you're concentrating and you're trying to. And a lot of it's emotion too. It's not just all mathematical. You've got a combination of emotions and feel going into it on top of everything else. So you're looking for that spark and you're looking to capture it. And I've gotten to a point where I use the phone right now and try to capture a lot of little things as I'm writing ideas down. using the cell phone, so that I don't lose the idea of some of the emotions that I'm trying to convey. Even if I don't have the lyrics all sorted out, I'll get the feel of what the melody should be in a new song. And I'm constantly writing. I mean, it just never stops. If you've been doing it and this is your hobby, you just do it all the time. It's like a painter. They just paint all the time.
Now, in your biography here, it says, being a New Yorker, I guess I'm drawn to offbeat and colorful characters, so I like to include them in my songs. In my new CD, they range from stalkers, smugglers, and outlaws to liars, losers, and thieves. Mike, does that sound like any industry you know? Colorful characters?
I've been in the
Yeah.
That's the point.
So that's what Greggy's saying is that, and that's a good segue. So how is, for lighting wise, how is you said you gave up your music or you put it on hold. I think was the words you used in your profile. You put it on hold to become a member of NAILD and to join the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Then you had the honor of sitting on the board, Tom. So
why?
What is it about? What is it about lighting? Like, how can we segue here? Is there anything that you've learned about music from lighting or lighting about music?
Well, there's a couple of different things, right? First of all, lighting is, there's so many different aspects to lighting. I mean, we were just talking about themes, right? And, but when you look at lighting and all the different markets that lighting touches into, there's so many. I mean, I grew up on the specialty side of the market, where you guys mostly grew up on the general lighting side of the market. So my 80-20 is flipped from most of the people in NAILD. But I grew up in the theater xenon, the stage studio metal halide, the semiconductor, mercury lamps for microlithography or for epitaxial reactors, or, the different types of lamps they use for chemical analyzers and blood analyzers. So I grew up on all the real, technical type of products, and it can go on and on and on and on. I was involved with Bally's for pinball machine bulbs way back when they were still making pinball machines. I was involved in Detroit with all different types of wedge-based lamps that they were using in automobile dashboards and stuff, or in aviation type of cockpits. So there's so many crazy applications where they're looking at the wavelengths of lights and the component of light, not just for general illumination, but for, specialty aspects. And one of the things I've always said about light bulbs is that every light bulb has a story. And, when you get to writing songs, or when you start talking about light bulbs or anything, you want to get to the story on each one of these things. So if I talk to you about microscope bulbs, I can tell you a story about almost every type of microscope bulb, why it's used, and what was the purpose of using that particular bulb. And it goes on and on. I mean, we do things like that for blood analyzing. Story on every single blood analyzing bulb, why it was designed a certain way, what they're looking for in terms of output, what wavelengths are important, what's the problem with noise, what's the problem with drift. And if you go to a song, same thing. It's like we were talking about with this guy, Kid Shalene. There's a story behind every song. There's a story behind every light bulb. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. And I applied a lot of what I do in songwriting and what I do for music when I got into the lighting industry. I mean, it's really, it's been a long journey in this lighting industry. I started in 1978 with Osram, right? And I've been in it ever since. I haven't, I was the young guy in the industry. Now I'm like the old guy in the industry.
What got you into it? How did you get involved with Osram in 1978?
I was selling computers for 1 year. I was working for a company called Burroughs in upstate New York. And that wasn't going to go too well. I had a real bad vision of where my future was going to go with Burroughs selling computers in upstate because I was in the mid-Hudson Valley. And they assign you either manufacturing or like banks or schools. I got assigned manufacturing. And there's only one big manufacturer in the mid-Hudson Valley in upstate New York, and that's IBM. And everybody's brother or sister or cousin works for IBM. And it's like, there's no way I'm going to sell against IBM. There's not a chance. So I lasted about a year with Burroughs, and I was doing pretty good selling calculators, but TI came onto the market with their little calculator, and I was like, can't even sell against these calculators. So I got to do something different. And I went to an employment agency. They sent me to this company called Macbeth Sales. And I remember the interview, the guy held up an FCS lamp, a little 5-pin halogen lamp. He says, "Do you think you can sell this?" And I said to myself, after trying to sell computers and calculators, absolutely not a problem. He said, "Fine, you're hired." So I took this job with Macbeth Sales, and within a year, they were bought by Osram, and they evolved from being Macbeth Sales to Osram Sales USA. When I started with Osram Macbeth Sales, there's less than 10 people there. And, well, you know the story of what happened there. I mean, they changed in Australia, and they just became a monster company. But at the time, they were this tiny little German import company that nobody had really heard of in the United States, and we had to pioneer the name. And it was a blast. I, at 22 years old, was traveling the United States and knocking on doors and trying to convince people to buy Osram microscope bulbs and studio bulbs, and had a lot of fun doing it. Was able to travel the whole country and even Europe at the time. Not a lot of people at 22 get to do that.
For sure. So I have a question for you. So you're from the specialty side. Now, this is true of all lighting. So in the past, there would be a product group would come out. So pre-LED, product group would come out. NEMA would make standards for it. So you'd have F39 T5HO 830K. Had to be this long, bipin on the ends, and had to have this phosphor and this color and all this sort of stuff in order to be considered that lamp. And then people would then manufacture that lamp, and that lamp would have a life cycle of 20 years or 30 years or whatever it was. And that was even more true of the specialty lamp market, right? So
yes, no.
What's that?
Yes and no.
Well, so now you have like number 722 miniatures or whatever, all those kind of different kinds of bulbs that go in aircraft and go in signal lamps and elevators and all this kind of stuff. And there's still a lot of those out there, actually, believe it or not. But
that's
but the question for you is, do you think that the LED, the lighting market abandoned standards to its benefit or to its peril? Because we've abandoned standards for sure.
I think there's going to be a problem. I think when we had that one other podcast on legacy lighting, I brought up that there was, just on base types, there's like over 160 different types of ANSI base types, which is one of the standards, right? Especially they use American National Standards Institute, ANSI. But I think there's like 160 different base types. The vast majority, they don't have LED versions for right now. And I don't think they're going to have LED versions because, they have to go through all the testings and make sure that they can withstand the heat. And a lot of them can't withstand the heat. So you've got a real problem coming with what are you going to do? There's a self-fulfilling prophecy happening in the lighting market where as we're moving into LEDs, a lot of the people that were making parts for light bulbs are dying because they don't have the demand to make these parts anymore. As the part suppliers die, eventually the lamp manufacturers can't make lamps anymore. So you're going to have a whole large group of lamps, especially lamps, that you're not going to have LED replacements for because you just can't. You can't put LEDs in every one of these bases right now because they can't handle the heat. They can't produce the light, or the type of light that you need from it is very, very, you can't achieve with an LED. An LED is typically mono monochromatic, where, halogen lamps are, you got a full spectrum. If you're going to do blood analyzing, for example, you need like 8 different specific wavelengths. You can't get that with an LED. LEDs will shift. You don't get that with the halogen lamp. You're going to get noise. You're not going to get that with that. So there's a whole series of things you can't do. And that's just one specific application. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications that you're just not going to be able to do with LEDs. And they're killing off the part suppliers. So you're going to have this big hole. So I do think it's at their peril that, in the race to get LEDs into the market, you're killing off a lot of the legacy products, and you're not going to have real good replacements for them. And this is why when we had our discussion on legacy, I was very pro about letting the market dictate and not letting government jump in and really goose it, because as it is right now, we've got a problem. But if you're going to goose it and start legislating in terms of, you've got to have this type of lumens per watt type of thing, you're just going to speed up the conversion process, and you are going to create a big, big empty hole in the marketplace where people are going to have sockets to fill and there's going to be nothing to fill them.
Yeah, that's a market that, Mike, I don't sell a lot of these specialty lights. I do if people ask for them, and then I source them and find them.
Sure.
But how does it typically go, Tom? Like, is manufacturers of this product typically selling to end users, or is it, like a microscope? How many of our customers have? I might have one that has 10 microscopes, but that's not a.
It's changed. Amazon is changed the landscape, right? Because, first of all, take a step back. The Pareto law, right? So you've got an 80-20 rule that's out there. And let's say 80% of the market is general lighting. Well, that means 20% is specialty lighting. Well, how big is the lighting market? How many $1 billion is, they're talking $30-40 billion in lighting. Tell me how big the specialty market is.
A couple billion.
Is it 20% of the lighting? I don't know. In my business, it's not. But yeah,
you play the numbers. The law of large numbers always will split 80-20, and the specialty market is definitely 20%. So, I think there's a big problem coming in terms of how you're going to handle some of these applications where you're just not going to have products in the future. Where were we going on this? What was the?
Who makes them? Like, what are the manufacturers that make specialty lamps right now that actually make them and can get them? And then who are they selling to? Are they going right to the end user now, or are they still working through distribution?
Amazon changed that landscape. So everything used to go through distribution, right? So you used to go to, in the microscope market, you would major micro, just use that as an example. And every market breaks down the same way. You're going to have your 3 or 4 big manufacturers, and then you're going to have distributor/dealer in every major city that then would resell the product out to the end users. And but that's not happening anymore that way. A lot of the spare part supply has gone out through Amazon, at least the onesie-twosie stuff. So they've really disrupted everything and flattened the whole marketplace. So it's not working the way that it used to. But traditionally, that's the way it went. And you have to adapt to what the new norms are in the marketplace. I think you still need the big distributors out there, because in my mind, Amazon, even for as much as they're selling and people are selling on it, is mostly moving onesie-twosies. When people buy on Amazon, they buy onesie-twosies. And distribution buys in bulk. So you still need people out there that are going to buy in bulk. And one of my big talks always when I ran Ushio for a long time is people, the onesie-twosie, you don't have to know who the person is you're buying from. At Amazon, you're blind to who you're buying from. But if you're selling large numbers, if you're selling bulk, it comes down to relationships. That's the thing that wins all the ties. If you know the people you're selling and they know you, but they don't know your competitor that well, you're going to win that tie.
Sometimes.
So,
not all the time.
Okay. You take whatever percentage you want, right? You could say you're going to lose 20% of the time because they got such a better price or a better product, you're going to lose. And you're going to win 20% of the time because you got such a better product or such a better price, you're going to win. The rest of the time, that other 60%, it's a tie. And you're going to win the tie because of relationships. But again, when you're selling bulk, when you're selling big volumes, you're not going to sell the big volumes on Amazon. You still need that type of distribution system out there. There's less and less and less of it, but you still need it. And because if you want to sell pallets, that's how you're going to have to do it.
Tom,
and
I'm going to interrupt you here. Where is there anybody in America that's manufacturing miniature halogen and incandescent bulbs?
Yes.
Oh, there is. Okay. You know them?
I've been in this market for 40, 50 years. Of course I do.
You want to tell us who it is?
Sure. You still have, like, for example, you still have Amglow down in Florida that's manufacturing all kinds of halogen lamps, and they manufacture lamps up in Chicago. They make all of the flash lamps that would go into IPL systems and things of that nature. And you've got APT on the West Coast. You've got ARC on the West Coast. You've got Excelitas on the West Coast. There's a lot of people. You've got Xenon Corp on the East Coast. You know, there's a lot of people manufacturing light bulbs still in the United States. Don't kid yourself.
Now, is there a strong market for distributors to go after for this, especially? I know it depends on what the special. Take microscope lamps, for example. Who do I go sell those
Greg
to?
wants to double down on the microscopes. He said it
Right
4
now.
times already.
I don't see where a general lighting guy is going to back a specialty lighting market. I mean, you're looking at different type of numbers games, and you're going to have to really build up to it. The key for you to get into that market is you're going to have the right supply source. If you had the right supply source, then you could actually go out and sell in that market. But as just a distributor, it's getting harder and harder because you're competing against Amazon. You're going to want to get the business and all of the
Who ships a CFL from Texas to Seattle for $6? Like, why? Like, Amazon is so weird. Like, who would do that? Like, that's such a waste of time. You're not making any money. The post office is not making any money. And because you didn't make that much money, you didn't pack it right, it's probably going to show up broken. Like, I don't understand.
You get into another pet peeve of mine about that whole thing, but we'll stay away from that because I
get angry
with Amazon and stuff, because I do think that they're not playing fair with
really. Come on.
Don't get me going.
Come on, Tom. What do you mean fair? Of course they're not playing fair. They're totally cheating. Everybody knows it.
Well, it's more than you can imagine. But I mean, doesn't matter. They basically taken over all of those markets, and it's going to take a lot to displace them and dislodge them. And I mean, it's where America shops right now. And so you just have to treat them as another type of distribution outlet. But I do think, getting back to it, if you want to move volume, if you want to move pallets, that's the way that you move pallets, the way that you move volumes is really, again, with relationship type of selling. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of cultivation. And it means going out breaking bread with people. I mean, I used to always instruct my guys at Ushio when I was working there that I wanted them to have lunch, dinner, breakfast with customers every single day.
That's actually tougher than you think. Even if you tell them that you're going to pay for it, it's actually tough. It's tough to get your guys to do that.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
I agree. Listen, it's not easy. I used to have strict face-to-face quotas. I wanted X amount of face-to-face meetings over the course of a month. They couldn't do it. but I still had to set a bar for everybody to do, because I thought that the most important thing was getting to know people, getting that a relationship established, because you had to be in a position to win the ties. You had to be in a position that, you know, if they have a choice between you and two other guys, you're going to be the one that wins. And if all things are equal, why do you win?
So what is it you do now? Yeah, what does BLC America do?
Well, really, the thing is, I don't like to get into these card games where you're sitting down with 1,000 people. And right now, this LED world, you're sitting down and playing a card game with 1,000 people. I don't like that. I'd rather go up against, 3 people, 4 people. I want a better chance of winning. So what I do is I do a lot of OEM work. So there's still people that are out there designing product in the United States. And where they're designing product, I don't care if they need a light bulb or if they need an LED, they sometimes have to go to an outside source to help with that design, because they need something unique. It doesn't exist. And they need something that's going to give them a 320 nanometer of power, and they need a certain level of intensity at that 320 nanometer because they're going to be doing work in terms of skin treatment. And those are the type of people I'll work with, because I can develop that lamp. I have, call it virtual factories, but I'm very well tied into a number of Japanese companies because I've been working with them for 30 plus years. And, I'll put the two together. I'll get the lamps developed. I'll customize lamps, and I'll work with an OEM. It's usually a 2-year, three-year process sometimes to develop a lamp. So you've got to have a lot of stuff in the hopper to do it. But then you've got a product that's unique. You sell it to that OEM. The OEM has a scheduled release every month of X amount. So you pretty much go into every month knowing what 80% of your sales numbers are going to be, because you've got scheduled releases to these OEMs every year. So I'm working a little bit differently than your traditional distributor would, because, I probably am split 80-20 again, 80% towards the OEM, 20% towards distribution, as opposed to where let's say a general lighting type of distributor is mostly working on projects, selling, every month, trying to develop what projects they're going to be selling into. I don't want to go into a month not knowing what my sales are already going to be, or 80% of my sales are going to be. That's why I kind of work in that direction.
That's why distribution was so great in the old days, because you could predict your sales with such accuracy. It was like almost like a pseudo subscription business, where you just knew how many light bulbs you were going to sell every month.
Exactly. But they changed the game, and they changed the game quickly.
Who's they?
Them.
Those bastards wrecked my business. I'm a bit of a project chaser. I'm a rebate chaser. I have a huge portion of my business that chases rebates, and I've done well with it. But, when you swing through the trees with your knife in your teeth, you're only as good as the next kill. And so, it is what it is. Hey, Scotty,
it all works.
I want you to cue up that Mind Torn Road and just let us go out with it for a bit here. Oh. Now, did you write this song, Tom? Music?
Yeah. For this piano intro here.
Very beautiful.
The piano intro was kind of the idea I had. I wanted to have something to bolt on the front end before we got into the song. Aaron Durr, who's a phenomenal piano player.
No, keep going, Tom. Keep telling us more about it.
Yeah, no, it's a real place in outside of Highland Falls, New York, down by Bear Mountain Bridge. It's called Mind Torn Road, and it connects the West Point outskirts of Opelo and how to trip across is what the song's about. So the plan in the story of the song was that they planned to double cross a guy on call it a drug deal. But in the process of the double cross, the guy's partner triple crossed him, or took the money and ran. which was his girlfriend. And, so he thought everybody died. And 20 years later, he sees her and realizes that the whole thing was a big scam. That's the song.
Well, Tom, we appreciate you being a guest on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast today. And your new album, Call Me Ishmael. Where can people find it?
You can find it everywhere. Amazon, it's on iTunes, Spotify. You can go on my website, tomsearch.com. I've got CDs for people to still listen to and want hard copies. Those out to them. So
beautiful.
Thank
Reggie,
you very much.
Yeah, man, it's been fun. That's a 45-minute hot blast with Tom Ciurczak, folks. Thank you for listening. Energyfocus.com, baby. That's ENERGFOCUS.com. Coming out with their end focus LED tubes, Greg.
That's right. No additional wiring needed to have
Wiring
the
or
capability
wiring?
that you want. Wiring needed. That means you can reuse your existing fixture, have the direct line voltage going to it. You can put a new LED tube in it. And inside of the LED tube has a color changing capability and dimming capability without rewiring. So real easy to do, cost effective too. A lot cheaper than buying new fixtures and all those fancy systems that others are throwing out there. They make it easy for you. They're focused on it. They got it down. And it's a great product.
So go to energyfocus.com. That's ENERGYFOCUS.com. And of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Come on, man. We got so much stuff going on, man. Whoo! The annual general meeting's coming out next week. We got the board elections coming out. We're giving out awards. We got a rollover on the board. We got all manner of stuff, Greg. This association is the hottest thing since Sunburn.
It's an exciting time to be a part of it. A lot coming out, a lot more in the works. Be ready. Get associated. Join us. Let's go.
Yeah. And of course, Tommy Ciurczak. Tom, thanks for coming on the show. Great album, by the way. Like a legit good album.
You told me that even before this, and so he's not lying here when we're recording this. He's told me that several times. So check out that album for sure.
Yeah, you know what? So unexpected from Tom. The last thing I would have expected from Ciurczak is he's putting out an album. Like
he's all of a sudden coolest guy in lighting. Where did that come from, Tom? You didn't tell us that until now.
So Mine Torn Roads is for me is a good solid rock and roll song. Strung Out, it's not a typical rock and roll song. It's more like a loungy, jazzy song. That's an amazing song, dude. Like if you just go and grab that song on its own, that's good enough, man. Everybody loves that one. My whole family loves it. My daughter sings it in the car. She sings the female duet part. It's a good tune, man. So check out Tom Ciurczak, and the album's called Call Me Ishmael. Check it out. And of course, for you guys, these are my albums, my songs, whatever I'm doing. I don't know if it's art or not, but I appreciate if you listen. Thank you for that. Bye for now.